In this video, we're going to learn about the structure and function of membranes. Our next type of lipid are phospholipids, and phospholipids are essential to the structure of cell membranes and the functioning of the cell. And phospholipids trade out one of the fatty acids for a phosphate molecule. So it's glycerol plus two fatty acids, and then a phosphate group is substituted. And phospholipids have a hydrophilic head, so this is this part, that's the phosphate group. So phosphate is very hydrophilic, so it's soluble in water. And then it has two fatty acid tails. And those fatty acid tails are insoluble in water, so they're hydrophobic. So this molecule is very confused because part of it wants to interact with water and part of it wants to avoid water. So when you add phospholipids to water, those phospholipids form structures known as micelles or spheres. So the hydrophilic head dissolves and interacts with the water, and the hydrophobic tails all mix and mingle into the center of that structure, and they're protected. Phospholipids go on to form our cell membrane and the membranes that surround all organelles. And the cell membrane is a phospholipid bilayer. So it is two layers, bilayer, of phospholipids. So the heads are found on the outside of this bilayer, and they interact with the watery matrix that's found both inside and outside of the cell. And the tails are protected on the inside. So you can see this part's the hydrophilic part, the extracellular space, it has a lot of water, the cytoplasm has a lot of water, and then the hydrophobic tails are found in the center, and they're protected against that water environment. Water can't pass through the cell membrane because of this, so we have to develop little pores that allow the water to go through. And cell membranes have to have embedded proteins and these hydrophilic pores to allow water, ions, and polar molecules through. So if you take a look here, each of these is a phospholipid, so right here. And then these are our non-polar tails and our polar head. And then we have a bunch of proteins that embed themselves into the membrane. So this one is called a peripheral protein. So it's just on one side of the membrane. It doesn't go across the membrane. This is a channel protein. So it goes all the way through, and it would have a pore or some sort of carrier mechanism that will carry the molecule through. And those channel proteins can be passive, so they can move the molecules across without using energy, and some of them actually have to expend energy to do so. So those ones would be called ion pumps. And we'll learn about ion pumps later in this course. We can also have what are called glycoproteins, and these are cell markers. So if you remember from grade 11 biology, and we learned about antigens or markers on blood cells, that's what that's referring to. So we have markers on all of our cells to communicate with other cells and to communicate with other molecules, so we know that things belong to us. So the markers on our cells, our body recognizes as us, so our immune system won't attack them. So glycoproteins are really important to have. Also, you'll see here, cholesterol is embedded in the protein, and cholesterol's job is to change the fluidity of the membrane. So it's found in animal cell membranes. It's mostly hydrophobic, so that's why most of it is embedded into the fatty acid tail portion of the phospholipid bilayer. But then there is a part that is hydrophilic, so it extends out towards the outer part, and it decreases the fluidity of the membrane, and it changes the permeability to some hydrophilic ions, so it prevents hydrogen ions and sodium ions from traveling through. It also helps the membrane curve, which allows the formation of vesicles. And if you remember, vesicles help surround and bring things into the cell or send out materials from the cell. There are many functions of proteins that are embedded in the cell membrane. So one of them could be a hormone binding site. So an example of that would be insulin binding to a protein on the liver. So it's a receptor that allows the cell to take in glucose to create glycogen. We also have immobilized enzymes found on the epithelial villi cells. So those enzymes are proteins that perform certain functions. So as the food is moving past those enzymes are right out there ready to interact with the particles that need digesting. Cell adhesion. So adhesion, remember, is sticking together. So it holds cells together, forming tight junctions. They also act as channels for passive transport. So both for facilitated diffusion channels, and then finally pumps for active transport.